Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the pre-bid advertisement meeting for the sand bypass project at Broward County Port Everglades. For the record, this meeting is being recorded as this is a virtual conference, and to maintain the time and order of the presentation, if anyone has any questions, please post in the chat, and questions will be addressed at the end of the meeting. I ask each company to send me an email with all in attendance from their company, stating names, titles, phone numbers, and email addresses. Additionally, please indicate interest as either a prime or a subcontractor. My email address is stabrown@broward.org, and you can also find that information in the chat, and it will be repeated again at the end of this presentation. A note to all attendees, this is an optional informational session to present an opportunity for our vendors to learn about the Port Everglades Sand Bypass project. This meeting is for informational purposes only. The requirements and conditions are subject to change once the solicitation is advertised, which it is expected to advertise early 2021. A little bit of the agenda that we'll be addressing throughout today's meeting. We have introductions, project overview, a history of the project, which our consultant will be going through, and solicitation requirements, questions and answer, and next steps. I'll be doing introductions from Broward County and the consultant at this point. I'll ask everyone from Broward County to introduce themselves. I'm starting with the Environmental and Protection and Growth Management Department.
Good morning, this is Samantha Danchuk. I'm the Assistant Director of the Environmental Planning and Community Resilience Division.
Good morning, I'm Darnell Kimbrough from the Small Business Office.
Good morning, this is Matt Elder, Port Everglades.
Derek Hubert from Port Everglades.
All right. Sorry, that's okay. Connie Mangan, Purchasing Division.
Good morning, Conrad Strong, Chief Harbor Master, Port Everglades.
Do we have any other Broward County employees on the line? Okay, my name is Stacy Ann Brown from the Purchasing Division. Our consultant from Olson Associates, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Creed, and I am the project manager for Olson Associates for the project.
Thank you. I'll now be passing the meeting over to Samantha, and she'll go a little bit into the Broward resilience.
Thank you, Stacy. So as context for the importance of this project, the sand bypass project has been a priority capital improvement for the county for decades, as the need for more cost-effective and readily available sand from the region was proven critical to providing protection from storms and from sea level rise. The sand bypass project was further recognized as a key resilience initiative. The project supports implementation of the coastal management objectives in the Broward Comprehensive Plan and the Climate Action Plan, and is the realization of the county's first adaptation action area of regional significance. The sand placement project area was designated in the land use plan to highlight the need for federal and state support during the permitting process. In so many ways, the development, the implementation, and the future operation of the project support the Commission's goals in proactively leading on resilience projects, especially for shore protection, promoting sustainable practices, and collaborating with multiple jurisdictions for coastal management. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Creed from Olson Associates and to allow him to begin the presentation for today. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Again, Chris Creed, and I'm going to flip ahead to some slides real quick. What I'm going to do is do an overview of this project. It's a multifaceted project, many different pieces of the project features that will constitute the entire sand bypass project. And I'm going to go through those and try to explain and give details about what each one of those are, and what just a summary of the elements. Won't get too far into the details and specifications and things like that, particular things, but we'll give you a general idea of what the general scope is of what we need to do to complete the sand bypass project. For those, and so get comfortable. This might take a little while, and then, but I will try to get through it pretty quickly. So Port Everglades, for those in the room, most everybody's familiar with where this is. It's in Southeast Florida, in the lee of the Bahama Bank. So the wave conditions in this portion of the world are not quite as active as they are in other areas of the east coast of the U.S. And so Port Everglades is located in southern Broward County, kind of between Fort Lauderdale and the city of Dania Beach. It is a federal navigation project that is hardened with jetties on the north and south side. Particular features that are of interest to what we are doing with the sand bypass project include the federal navigation channel, the channel itself, the north jetty in its current configuration, a large rubble spoil shoal to the north of the inlet identified there. You can see this is a pretty clear photograph. It's pretty clear to see several features, particularly on the bottom, in the bottom portion of the, so you can see the edge of the channel, which is cut through rock, and the side slopes are relatively steep compared to most navigation features. And then the large rubble spoil shoal here. The spoil shoal is the product of a 1962 channel expansion event, where instead of going to the ODMDS or offshore with disposal or other disposal features, the material was simply side cast to a site about 800 feet north of the inlet in a large mound offshore of the beach. But through time, the waves and currents in this area have pushed this rubble mass toward the beach, and it has welded to the shoreline, which is an important part of the planning and developing of the plan for the sand bypass project. The beach to the north is also of interest. Other things to think about, we call this area just to the landward side of the north jetty tip, the jetty notch, which at one point may have been a planned area for a sand trap for bypassing from the inlet, but was never used. And then this is south jetty. But for the most part, our interest is on the north side of the channel for this project. This is just a quick sketch of the bathymetric conditions to further demonstrate what these features look like. Deeper blues are deeper water. White, the milder colors here are shallower water. So on top of the rubble spoil shoal, pretty shallow, up to relative to NAVD 88, about 4 to 5 feet. And the bottom of the navigation channel is in excess of 50 feet. That is the channel cut itself. It's not necessarily the authorized channel, but that's just the elevations of where the channel cut it goes to. There are other features that affect the channel, and what we'll be doing is a small shoal where sand migrates around the north jetty and is occasionally dredged from this area. And there is an O&M project coming up within the next few months that could change our ultimate volume of material that we think we might have to excavate for the sand bypass project, but we will update that information when it becomes available after that project is complete. So this is a general summary of the features we need that we'll continually talk about through the presentation. Just real quick, if anybody's a history buff, I'll give a couple slides on what the history. This is what Port Everglades is a man-made inlet that was cut to connect the ocean with Lake Mabel back in the mid-20s. And you can see here the construction of the jetties themselves. At that time, there was an inlet to the north called New River Inlet, which closed after they opened Port Everglades. But some of these features that you see in the photograph here from 1928 are still part of the inlet infrastructure. To give you an idea as well, this is what it looked like prior to after the 1962 expansion, and you can see the rubble spoil shoal here in this photograph just off the beach in this little mound, little perturbation in the shoreline, the configuration of the north jetty at that time. But in 1980, the north jetty was realigned to its current configuration. to accommodate a channel widening project. So the photograph to the right, you can see that again, the rubble spoil shoal, more typical of its current condition, is not emergent anymore, and it has welded to the shoreline. So the reason for the sand bypass project, no sand goes across the inlet naturally. And so sand is accumulating in the shoreline to the north or either falling into the inlet for most of it to be disposed of offshore. And there's no material that gets to the downdrift beach naturally. And so we've had an offset from the accretion to the north and the erosion to the south. We want to rectify that to the extent we can with this project. So we've divided the activities associated with the sand bypass project into 3 principal components. We have a dredging component that will include several actions. The first action would be recovery of some granite boulders that are a relic from the 1980 jetty realignment. That they didn't completely remove all the boulders that are as part of the old jetty alignment that are in our project footprint. Some limestone boulder removal that will go to the ODMDS. But the principal pieces would be the sand trap excavation with disposal at the ODMDS and to the beach to the north, where we were trying to place as much of the available beach compatible sand and keep it in the beach system. And we believe we have the opportunity to put some of that material back on the beach to the north to accommodate the performance of the project. And then removal of a portion of that rubble spoil shoal that was created in 1962. So these are the main activities that we believe would be associated with dredging type activities. And I'll explain each one of these as we go on. The next is rock work. As part of this, there's extensive improvements to the jetty. We need to extend it to accommodate some potential effects this project will have to the shoreline to the north. We want to minimize the net landward translation of the shoreline following the removal of the rubble spoil shoal and the creation of the sand trap. We want to add elevation and tighten the north jetty. It's very porous. It's not very effective at retaining sand on the beach to the north. Those conditions need to be improved. And we're going to construct a small interior groin in that jetty notch. And you'll see where all these pieces are relative to one another in just a second. And then the last thing is we're calling the environmental section. These are efforts that are similar generally in scope to some of the other things like the rock work, where we're going to need to construct a boulder barrier out of limestone rock, about ½ acre of mitigation reefs made of limestone boulders, and then there's some rubble clearing in that rubble shoal removal area where we're attempting to recreate some substrate, some reef foundation that was covered by that 1962 project. And we believe that there could be environmental benefits associated with the project by re-exposing that substrate. And that's going to be another part that we are categorizing as environmental. So turn your head to the left to kind of north is to the left now. So I have flipped the inlet on its side. So if I'll give you a second to orient yourself with how this is, you can see Fort Lauderdale on the left, the south side of the inlet, South Jetty's on the right. So we're looking at and the inlet channel is up and down in this configuration. So what this is from our plan sheets, and the purpose of the sheet is to give you a summary of all the elements. And I'll quickly go through these, and I'm going to do it in this format to begin with, and I'll do it in a different format next, just so we can all get on the same page with what each of these pieces of the project are. Okay, the first thing is recover the remnants of the old jetty foundation. If you remember, in pre-1980, the jetty had a southeast alignment, and they moved it to the north, to a due east, the seaward tip of it to the due east. And they removed a lot of that material to reconstruct the new jetty alignment, but they left a lot of it in place. And so that material, remaining material, needs to be recovered. There are also some limestone boulders. The source of these are not exactly clear, and I can have some photographs of these in a minute. And these boulders need to be recovered and disposed of in the ODMDS. Then we construct the sand trap, the major feature. So this is the configuration of the sand trap, and you can see that it's not just a rectangular box, but has an odd shape to it, which is very purposeful for the purpose of collecting sand that will ultimately be directed toward it once we remove the rubble spoil shoal. Put some of that material on the beach to the north. You can see in the light blue there. And then we want to extend the north jetty. It'll be an alignment that goes off to the northeast. The old alignment was to the southeast. So we're going to put an extension on the end of the north jetty that goes off to the northeast. That will be adjacent to the sand trap. We will also improve the north jetty, the existing portions of the north jetty, by raising it, the elevation, and sand tightening it. Then we will move the rubble spoil shoal. The blue shaded here is the extent of the footprint of where the rubble shoal removal activity will occur. This would be removed by dredge with disposal of this material in the OD&DS. Also from the sand trap, except with the exception of the sand that would be put on the beach to the north, all the material goes to the OD&DS. Then we're going to construct a rubble barrier of boulders. The purpose of this rubble barrier is to prevent the remaining portion of the rubble spoil shoal from continuing its landward migration that would ultimately have the potential to contaminate the area that we were going to clear and that will serve as habitat mitigation. Then we're going to construct, so there you can see at the bottom, here's the small interior groin. You can see the notch again and highlighted in orange. It's a small little structure on the west, which is the western edge of this trap. This is the bottom of the photograph. The purpose of this structure is to retain this small sand beach within this area here. It's almost a mitigative factor because this sand beach inside the notch is maintained by sand getting through and over the north jetty right now. And once we do this project, we expect that to stop. And so we want to retain this sand beach, which is a recreational beach for the community. We're going to clear the 7.3 acres of rubble. This is the area where we believe that there was pre-existing substrate and that we want to re-expose as much of that as we can. Any material that's recovered from this would go to the OD&DS. And then down in the bottom right, I'm just going to highlight the mitigation reefs. They are not in the photo where they'll be constructed are not specifically in this photograph, but I'll explain more about that when we get to that point of the presentation. So let's just run through this one more time. And now north is up again, and this kind of puts it in perspective with this nice clear photograph we have. You can even see some of the jetty stones underwater there that are peeking through the sand. So that's where this material is. We will want to recover these stones and reuse them. These the granite stones in this area would not go to the OD&DS. Then the limestone boulders we talked about are generally in the circles here. These would go to the OD&DS. And we build the sand trap. So you can see the purpose of getting rid of these boulders now. We have a conflict between where these existing boulders and jetty stones are with where we want the sand trap to be. And we have design elevations for the trap. So we need to clear these materials from the footprint of the area. Beach disposal, this is the general location where we replace the sand. For whatever material is available, I mean, it's possible there won't be any sand available at the time. This is going to be an adaptive management type thing as we go into the process of construction. I'm understanding exactly how much of this material might actually be available. The O&M project may pretty much clear everything that we would have available to us. Then we would do the jetty extension. You can see its relative location in this depiction to the sand trap. We're going to rehab the existing stones by raising the elevation and tightening them. This is the footprint of the rubble spoil shoal removal. The interior groin, you can see just popped up on the left in this photograph. Then the boulder barrier, which is over to the right now, is depicted in green, and that would be just a series of boulders that would be placed in this area to prevent the shoal from continuing to migrate landward. The rubble clearing area, and then the mitigation reefs. So this is a nice summary of all the pieces of our project. And they are presented more or less in the order that we anticipate that they should be constructed. There will be some limited sequence of work that we put in our specifications, but there will be flexibility on when things can be constructed. But there are some goals that we have with the order of work that we'll want to identify in our specifications but we will be willing to accommodate, the contractor's need for particular order of work. So for example, you could build a mitigation reefs first. You could build those anytime you want to because they're not in this place here. However, we would like the sand trap constructed before we construct the jetty extension. And that's just 2 examples. So again, just some nice photographs of Port Everglades, what it looks like today. You can see the North Jetty. This is looking to the north. You can see the Royal Shoal just barely underwater. The North Jetty, the interior notch, and the interior beach. And another point to make here is just the fact that this is located in a highly developed area and an area of high use from a navigation standpoint, with the commercial port and the federal navigation project adjacent to the project area. So the general area of our project here, again, just another look at it. You can see kind of the footprint of where the dredging would occur and the jetty improvements, but just to give you a perspective of how close some of this work is to some pretty highly developed areas. So let's get into the individual pieces. I'll kind of go into more details of each one of those things that I outlined previously to talk about our goals right now with what we want to do. So this is the jetty boulder recovery plan, and we want to recover as many of these boulders as we can from this footprint, put them in and this is what it looks like. And if you look, this is looking along the existing jetty to the west toward the port, and you can see just a little perturbation in the jetty here. This is the old part of the jetty, and these stones would be recovered, put on the beach or put on the jetty for subsequent use elsewhere. These are appropriately sized jetty stone, and we feel that we have the opportunity to reuse this material just like they did in 1980. So we believe there's about 5,000 to 7,000 tons of these things. Each of these stones weigh an estimated 6 to 9 tons each, and they're made of granite. And we would move this material to a temporary stockpile to be determined, and for subsequent reuse in the jetty extension, most likely, or other areas as may be needed. It's just to give you an idea of where the old jetty stones. This is a depiction of how the jetty realignment occurred in 1980, using a 67 photograph and a more recent photograph in 2019. But it was that seaward end that pointed toward the southeast. The port is to the top now, ocean to the bottom. So in the 1967 photograph, you can see the spoil shoal here that had only been in place for about 5 years at the time, had not connected to the beach. And so it has moved, this rubble material has moved westward over that time. It's unconsolidated material. But you can see how they repurposed these jetty stone for a more eastward alignment of the jetty at the time. So let's talk about the sand. Next to the limestone boulders, before we start excavating the sand trap, we want the contractors to be aware that there are boulders in the way that might not be compatible with the equipment that you might want to build the sand trap with. So we have authorization to remove these boulders and put them in the ODNDS. And so the first step would be to collect any of these larger materials for disposal to get them out of your way. We work with the agencies to identify, ODNDS disposal might be the most cost-effective thing to do with these boulders. And so that's what we've been allowed to do. And just to put this in perspective, you can see here, I put a scale that's about 200 feet in length to give you a size of what the sand trap is, just to kind of get your eyes fixed on the scale of everything we're talking about. So here again, you can see the Point of America's condominium over here to the left and where the sand trap will be located. Then these are some photographs of the boulders. You can see the diver in the photograph. Some of them are quite large. We don't really have much more in terms of the size of these things, and it could have been produced from that 1980 channel widening project where the boulders had been created. You can almost see some dredge teeth marks in this boulder here where it may have been produced, and they just side cast it to get it out of the way. But we've got to get rid of these things now. All of this would go to the ODNDS. So now let's talk about the sand trap. The sand trap is not only odd shaped in plan form, but odd shaped vertically as well. We have 4 areas that we've identified in the sand trap, and they have specific purposes. The area A, which is shaded in blue here, is within the existing channel cut. We believe most of the materials within this area down to -50, which has been excavated previously through rock, is comprised almost entirely of unconsolidated materials, sand, silts, and rubble likely. And so this would be basically re-exposing what we call the channel wall that was created during the 1980 channel expansion project. Then we have the area B, which we're calling the sill. We were not able to open this sand trap up to the channel because of hydrodynamic issues associated with removing the channel wall and ship use in this channel. And so we are required to leave the channel wall in place, and we've created through design a channel wall that would remain, that we believe will be stable from a geological standpoint, and sort of purpose of maintaining the channel wall. So this area would only be excavated down to -20, which in turn would limit additional activities for the excavation of the remaining portion of the sand trap. So you wouldn't be able to open up a pathway to get material in. You'd be limited in depth to -20, at least for transit in and out with scows and other equipment. And then there's an area C, which would be down to -42, and then area D down to -29. The reason these 2 areas are different, -42 is we're trying to maximize our sand storage capacity in the sand trap, but also the area D to the north, we didn't dig it all the way to -42 to minimize risk to the beach and the beach slipping off into a very deep area. So that although it seems very odd, each of these are very purposeful footprints and elevations. So we believe there's about to accommodate this on the current conditions, not knowing how the O&M would affect what's going on in area A. Materials comprised of sand, rock, and rubble and rock, solid rock, and we believe it'll be about 280,000 cubic yards of material. We don't think it'll be much more than that. And the beach compatible sand would go to the beach to the north, and everything else goes to the ODMPS. So this is going to give you a plan view, or a cross-section view of what this looks like. This is distorted, but it gives you an idea going from left to right. You can see the existing channel wall. I mean, the existing channel, the black line here represents the existing seabed. So there's unconsolidated material down to -50 here. Then the sill is the area B is the next. Then the next sand trap area C, and then D. And further to the right is the rubble shoal removal area. We'll talk about that later. But this is just 2 depictions of what that cross section looks like of those 4 different areas of the sand trap. Let's talk about geologic conditions. We've got a very robust data set of cores that have been taken down to at least -50 feet throughout this area. It's a long time design process of this. We originally wanted to blast to do some of this work because of some of the harder material at the deeper elevations. We've redesigned the sand trap recently with the goal of staying above the hardest material to make this sand trap constructible without blasting, because we were unable to secure blasting permits because of the proximity of this project to adjacent infrastructure. But to give you a very general idea, here's again the cross section from left to right, showing the sill to the left and moving through the deeper area, -42 to -29, A, B, and C from left to right. We have sand, silt, and weakly cemented limestone in an upper layer. To the far right is the rubble shoal. But all of this is expected to be mostly unconsolidated material that would be easily excavated. Then we run into a zone of where the rock material is consolidated now, and it will take breaking to remove this material. Mostly sandy limestone and limestone, and relative hardnesses are not quite as high as it exists at the deeper depths. I won't get into the hardnesses right now, but just know that as we increase in depth, we do increase rock hardness, And so we're trying to avoid the areas in red to the extent that we can. However, we're not completely able to, based upon the data that we have, avoid everything. So the contractor should be prepared to encounter some relatively hard materials in the deeper area of our design horizon. But we believe those to be pretty limited. And once the bid packages are issued, we will provide all the geotech data that we have. And so all this information will be provided to you for consideration in your bid and your dredge plan. There will be no pre-treating any of this material with using the techniques of blasting and cutter head chopping. Blasting, we couldn't get permits for, and ultimately the National Marine Fisheries Service put a prohibition on cutter head chopping of the material without the hydraulic pumps of a hydraulic dredge gauge, should that be the type of equipment you choose to use. So we fought that one, we lost, but those are the pre-treatment methods that cannot be used for the project. But others, such as limited punching and drilling, are still on the table. So just to give you an idea, the scope and area of extent of where the sand, where we believe there to be beach compatible sand that would have light rubble in it, that would take some screening to make sure that it is beach compatible, that we don't put unacceptable material on the beach to the north. We believe there would probably at the time of construction be 10 to 30,000 yards of this stuff, and it would be placed on the beach to the north. And you can do that by mechanical or hydraulic means, or whatever way is best, and just push the material around. For example, like moving it around with hydraulic, off-road trucks and things. But it's a pretty limited amount of material. But we are trying to preserve to the extent we can beach compatible material that is available to us in the beach system. So that is our goal. Rubble, I'm doing this a little bit out of order in terms of how I explained the order of work earlier. I'm sticking with the dredging activities first. So here's the rubble removal. What we intend to do are give the contractors design elevations for the rubble removal based upon what we believe the seabed looked like before the rubble shoal was put in place. We expect there to be 100 to 120,000 cubic yards of material encountered in this footprint, and all of this material will go to the ODNDS. This is just a photograph to show you a typical condition on the seafloor. These are surface conditions, but to give you just, that's a dive weight. That's probably a 4-inch by 4-inch dive weight. It's a typical size of the material, what you would expect a hydraulic cutter head dredge to produce when it's cutting rock in an unconsolidated mass. That is made of silts and sands and vary from rubble of a broad range of sizes. It's pretty typical. So the ODNDS, just speak to that for just a second. It's the existing Port Everglades ODNDS, which is about a little more than 3 miles past the sea buoy at Port Everglades, which is available. Our current disposal plan is for the boulders to be disposed of in a small area in the northwest corner of the ODNDS, with everything else to be disposed of in a drop zone on the south side of the ODNDS. We've had some recent communications with EPA. It's possible that they're going to eliminate the boulder site and just let us put everything in the southern drop zone, and that would be preferred in my opinion, so we don't have to sort this material. But we will have that resolved before the bid is advertised. But this is what we have right now in our existing permit. So let's move on to the rock work, and we will start to, I think there might be a question, and I will address these at the end. So there's rock work now that we'll start with the jetty extension, and so the jetty extension will we want it to be sand tight. It's going to have a center that is made of steel sheet pile. So the first thing will be is putting in about 120 to 150 feet of steel sheet pile. Then marine mattress foundation, a stone-filled marine mattress as the foundation of the structure. Then the riprap armor stone would be placed in a configuration with typical side slopes that you encounter about 2 to 1. in a very typical riprap type configuration, similar to the existing jetty. This gives you an idea of the steel sheet pile, where it would be located. There will be some accommodations. We have some top of rock elevation along where we think the sheet pile is going to go. Estimated embedment depths into that rock. Again, this is more the unconsolidated area. Possibility of encountering some of these old jetty stones here, and we will accommodate that should that occur with the installation. Then you would put in the marine mattresses, and you would put the riprap armor stone on top of that. And these are typically, we believe, to be about 6 to 10 ton stone, similar to what we've had in the existing jetty. About 15,000 tons of stone to do this. 15,000 tons of stone, 16,000 square feet of marine mattresses, and then this would all be specific gravity 2.65, so granite or equivalent type rock. Then we go into the jetty improvements. This is where it's going to be located. It's going to be seaward of the Point of Americas at the landward termination of it, and it's going to affect the 2 east-west portions and the 1 portion of the jetty that goes to the northwest and southeast. This is a little complicated to explain. I want to give you an idea. We intend to basically manipulate the existing jetty stone and then put in an impermeable sand type core using geotechnical and grid composite materials, and backfill it with new stone. And this, what we've put in our plans with the sequencing of how this work would go to instruct the contractor on how this would be done. We would also give you the stone sizes as well. These stone sizes are going to be a lot smaller than what we need for the jetty extension, and more manageable to deal with. And we'll talk about how you'll be able to stand on the beach to the north to do this work. I have an access slide later in the presentation. So the interior groin, we've really zoomed in here. North is up. You can still see the existing steel bulkhead, sheet pile bulkhead here. That's some of that original infrastructure that I identified in that history slide from the 20s. But this is the small beach to the top here. And this is where this jetty would be, this small groin would be, and it would all be constructed from the water side. And so there would be no access of equipment or materials on this beach. We put in, again, a stone fill marine mattress foundation, and simply put a rip wrap armor stone, chinking stone composite mass on top of the stone, of the mattress materials. Pretty simple, really. Put the mattresses in and build the structure. This is just an example of what the marine mattresses look like for those who may not be familiar with this. This is from an application in South Carolina a few years back. This is the BX mattress from a vendor called Tensar, where you have specific specifications on how these mattresses were to be assembled. There's handling instructions and installation instructions. But once they're fabricated, they're actually pretty easy to install. And they retain their position in place once you put them in. So we've added these mattresses not only for the stability of the structure, but it also is somewhat easier to construct compared to other foundation type applications. Give you an idea, that's not my foot, but it's someone with a foot about the same size as me, what the grid composite material looks like that's used to make the mattresses, and the size of the fill stone. And the vendor who provides this product has lots of information on how this is to be assembled, and it's possible that they can also provide the product assembled for you, and you simply just have to grab it, have it delivered, and put it in. And then again, it would just be a stone mass that would be the ultimate form of this interior groin, much like the other jetty work. So let's talk about let's get to the environmental, and this is actually not the mitigation reefs. I've missed a typo here. I shouldn't have relabeled this. This is the boulder barrier, but it's very similar to the mitigation reef as well. So for the boulder barrier and the mitigation reef, this is just armor stone, limestone armor stone. We've changed the stone type to be limestone, and it's just armor stone size stones installed. There's no chinking involved, and it will just be put in this compact mass to the extent you can. So the boulder barrier and the mitigation reefs can all be thought about as the same type activity. It's just they're going to be located and configured a little differently. And you can see in this photograph here that this is currently one of our mitigation sites, the 2.2 acre mitigation site. So we would put the boulder barrier. This would be just a line of boulders from north to south in a straight line. It would have a single layer in some areas, a double layer in others. It would be within the footprint of where the rubble shoal had been removed. We would put the boulder mass there, as depicted in this with the green shading and a typical just a trapezoidal type configuration to the extent you can get it. We would give dimensions of the height and width and length of this structure, and you basically stay in the footprint, put the boulders there, and you accomplish the mission. Rubble clearing, once the boulder barrier goes in place, this is also the area where, and the reason we put this in environmental, we don't believe this would be an activity that would be effectively accomplished with the dredge, but it could be. I mean, that's up to the industry to figure that out. Of how to make this work, but our goal is once the major mass of this portion of the rubble shoal is removed, is to have a follow-on activity of clearing the residual rubble from this area, and to the extent we can, and to the extent that it exists, re-expose the pre-existing hard substrate beneath it, with the goal of that colonization of coral communities can become reestablished in this area. So this is going to be a pretty unique aspect of the project that, and we'll put performance conditions on this, and it'll be up to the contractor to select the type of approach they want to use to accomplish this particular task. This is the type of product we're looking for. You can see there is still some rubble in the picture, but there are areas of hard substrate where there is no rubble. So it's not a matter of clearing all the rubble, but getting as much of this material out of the system as possible is the goal. So the mitigation reefs, these are, like I said, one of them is within this footprint closer to the inlet. We might relocate this, we still haven't decided, but just understand both of these are going to be water-based activities where you're bringing, likely from a barge, bringing boulders in to build a 0.2 acre reef in one site, which is the shallow water site, and building a 0.3 acre reef, you can see up to the top left, in about 40 feet of water, which is the deeper water site, a total of 0.5 acres. So they're relatively small, and the purpose of these boulder reefs are for coral relocation and coral attachment eventually. So there's not massive mitigation type footprint, but just structures that will be used subsequently for some coral rehabilitation activities. To give you an idea, it's going to be a mass of rocks. If you look in the top right, this is the box in the offshore. You can see, well, that's about 45 feet, between 45 and 50. That's a very big box, and we're only going to build 0.3 acres in this box, so we will tell you exactly where that goes. But the plan would be, hey, prepare to put 0.3 acres of boulders in this box, and we'll tell you later where they exactly go. Should be relatively straightforward. The performance criteria for this will be make sure it's as close together as it can be. The type of activity you would expect, barge mounted activities with a crane, putting boulders in the water as close together as you can. And that is pretty simple. This also is for the boulder barrier that I explained as well. So let's talk about access for a minute. Our access here is very limited, which is another complicating issue for this project. We do not have access from the upland for equipment or materials. And so the contractor needs to be prepared to bring everything in by water. And once they have the equipment, clearly dredging is a water-based activity, but given that we need to do jetty work on the beach to the north, there would be sand placement activities, sand screening possibly, and other activities that would be required on the beach to the north. The material to accommodate that would have to be delivered by barge to the work site. We have a footprint, you can see in the orange here, this is the area available to us that you can stage, storage, operate work, and perform any activities you want to on the beach to the north. It's relatively robust in size. You can see about 200 by 200 feet. the larger piece of it to the east here, and there's a smaller piece. And the reason it's smaller, this is a jetty access corridor, and it actually may extend even seaward. So this may extend all. We may be able to make this box, this shaded area, a little more robust to accommodate the jetty activities. But it's something that we need to look into. And then the sand placement activity right now would go in the green box, and that would be the access area for that. So once you get on the beach, you're not highly constrained. You do have a little room to move around, and so that would that's what's going to be available for that. And so the contractors need to be prepared for a water-based mobilization for jetty work and other activities on the beach. Other things, clearly, given the location of the infrastructure adjacent to us, the vibration monitoring and control is an important thing. That will be required to the dredging, beach work-related activities, as well as other jetty work, to ensure that we're not causing unacceptable vibration levels, particularly to the condominium. This is immediately adjacent to our work site and other areas. That will be a requirement. And then environmental protection, I want to quickly summarize what you will be expected to do and explain other aspects of what will be going on during the construction process. So this is a footprint of our work site and our mixing zone and this is related principally to the dredging activities. And so the shadings are different types of hard bottom habitat that exist adjacent to our work site. Of particular interest is the area in the green. That is considered colonized pavement and has very valuable hard bottom resources, particularly the corals that are listed as endangered and threatened and endangered under ESA. And so there is a very active sedimentation and turbidity monitoring effort that will be going on as part of this work to control how we protect these resources. So this mixing zone is fairly robust. So you do have some room, and the criteria that we have is 29 MTUs at the edges of the mixing zone, but we also have other thresholds within here should we exceed like sedimentation levels or something. There's an adaptive management protocol that we'll have to follow during that course of during dredging. They could control how you operate when we're dredging particular areas, particularly when we're very close to it. It extends about 1,000 meters to the west in the channel, 300 meters to the north, 500 meters to the east, and about 150 meters to the south. So those distances, when we're monitoring turbidity mixing, turbidity will be relative to where the dredge is operating, or where that should, scow filling activities as well, anywhere you're producing turbidity. So to give you an idea of what's going on, and I think I have so sedimentation and turbidity will not be required, and monitoring will not be required of the contractor. That is going to be conducted by third-party consultants under a separate contract of Broward County. They will be monitoring the water quality and sedimentation levels and reporting back in real time to the county, to the resource agencies, and the dredging contractor on how those turbidity levels are being or what they are and how they might need to be changed to protect the resources that are adjacent to the project area. Most of the focus of the sampling will be over the consolidated pavement area, which is in the area of interest. And we realize that given the small scale of this project, there's only a small period of time when this will be most problematic, and except maybe during some odd times of an outgoing tide. For example, we wouldn't expect to have very, very many problems at all should there be an ingoing tide. So they'll be monitoring the densest portion of the plume within, these areas and over the consolidated pavement. And there'll be divers in the water daily, looking at sedimentation impacts and sedimentation accumulation in these areas to create feedback for the dredging contractor should we need to alter dredging operations for a short period of time. Hey, let's only dredge on the incoming tide for the next few days and see what happens, or other types of activities. Clearly, we would be interested and welcome the contractor to come up, should there be problems, on ways that we manage these criteria that we're faced with to protect these resources. So I would invite all of those interested in bidding this project, the dredging contractors, to this material is available online with the Corps at this point. Our permits have been issued, and the biological monitoring plan and our biological opinion from the National Marine Fisheries Service is available with a lot of this criteria already outlined on what we need to do and what our third-party consultants will be doing to monitor and track sedimentation and turbidity over these sensitive resource areas. There's also some seagrass beds to the interior, which we are not as concerned about, but we do have to monitor them, and there could be, should there be problems on the seagrass beds, then we would also need to accommodate some type of change to the activities to alleviate those effects. So we do have our goal is to build this next year, but the contractor should be aware that there will be prohibitions on dredging of the sand trap and rubble shoal, not the other activities, boulder removal, jetty construction, mitigation construction, these other activities. But essentially between July 21 and September 14th, there's a no dredge window because it's coral spawning season for a lot of the corals offshore, particularly the acropora species. So that has been imposed on us through our federal permit. So that's kind of the summary of the project. I will open it up to questions in a second. I see one, and then, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy, and then we'll have questions. But I can quickly do this, and Sam and Stacy can clearly speak to it as well. Right now, today is the 4th. We're having our industry meeting. We expect a bid announcement after the first of the year. With the ultimate goal, you can see the different milestones here. We do want to provide a robust bid response period because of the complexity of this project. Understanding it may take some time for teams to be identified and vetted for some of the sub-consultant work. But our goal is to start construction sometime next summer, and we will give a very robust construction window as well as our goal. Understanding that we have prohibitions for like the coral spawning season and things like that, and just given the complexity of this project. And I'll finish here with a funding statement. All the funding is secured, and if Sam wants to speak to this a little more when I turn it back over to these guys. It is secure, is a local project. The federal government is not involved. This is not part of the federal navigation project or the federal shore protection project. This is an initiative by Broward County, as Sam mentioned, as part of their resiliency program and their comprehensive beach management program in the county. And our current operating budget, what we believe to be our budget at this point, is right around $30 million for all the activities associated with this project. So with that, I will turn it back over to Stacy and let her wrap it up, and then we can move into questions and comments should there be any. Well, I tell you, Stacy, if you give me just a second, I will. There is one. Why dispose of the large boulders in ODM as opposed to shallower mitigation reef area? We were not required to do that by permit because of the potential complexity of having to grab those boulders and move them. But if that is a proposal that a contractor would want to say, hey, it's easier for us to just move these, we would need to know that, and we could possibly incorporate that in the plan, but we are not requiring it as an activity. Everyone just seemed to think it would be easier for the contractor to recover them and dispose of them, and the resource agencies. So that's it for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. I'll actually start. Again, this is Connie Mangan, Purchasing Manager. I'm just going to do a high level of solicitation requirements. Again, this is a pre-advertisement meeting. The final bid has not been issued, so this is high level. The bid will have the final requirements of it, but we're trying to give you some advance notice regarding it. It's expected bidder qualifications will be included for the prime previous experience with similar dredging projects of size and nature, and then also the prime required to have subcontractors for previous experience with major subcomponents. Example was the rock jetty work. It's expected that Broward County prevailing wage rate ordinance would be applicable. That would be the heavy wage rate tables, and those are the same wage rate tables that would be similar to Davis-Bacon. As Chris mentioned, this is a county project. However, there is grant funding from the State of Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So if there's any additional requirements that we need to add from that grant, we'll be including in the bid solicitation document. Stacy will review bonding and insurance requirements.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Okay, the solicitation would be requiring a bid bond of 5%. Vendors have 2 ways in which they can get the bid bond to our purchasing division. You can either use surety 2,000 or you can mail the bond to our Andrews Avenue address, which will be stated in the solicitation. The recommended bidder for award will need to furnish a payment and performance bond. And on our purchasing division website, you have the payment and performance bond forms available to you. Some of the insurance requirements are listed in the bulletin before. I just wanted to point out for this specific solicitation, we have the protection and indemnity in collision liability for watercrafts. As Chris mentioned, for transportation, a lot of it will be through the water, so that's very important. The final insurance requirements will be made available in the solicitation documents. Please review that, and you can submit your certificate of insurance with your bid submittal as well.
All right, there's also expected to be goal participation requirements. Broward County, through its Office of Economic and Small Business Development, certify local firms that are referred to as business enterprises. The percent will be included in the advertised solicitation, though I believe it's been set at 2% of the bid amount will be required for the vendors to use the Broward County business enterprise firm. You can actually look at firms, the certification directory. We've included the page there, but go to broward.org and look for Office of Economic and Small Business Development. Through their website, you can look for certified firms. Again, you're looking for Broward County CBEs. Also in the solicitation, expected to have workforce investment, which is a program by Office of Economic and Small Business for hard to hire or disadvantaged workers. Additionally, any security requirements if vendor is accessing Port Everglades. That would include either background checks or Twit cards. Domestic partnership that requiring that firms, if they offer benefits to their workers, offering to domestic partners on the same basis. And then Broward County also has local preference for local firms and locally based firms. There could be a request for a best and final offer based on final differences.
The solicitation will be using the BCF 170 contract. I urge potential vendors to familiarize themselves with this contract at the website posted in the presentation. Once you get to the website, go to the purchasing division, and under Broward County Standard Agreement Terms and Conditions, you'll see the standard form for the construction contract BCF 170. Please keep in mind the final contract will be in the actual solicitation. This is made available to you to get yourselves acquainted with the standard general conditions of our contract, but the final contract will be in the solicitation. And this is the contract that the bidder and the county will be signing. So in the meantime, I urge potential vendors to go ahead and visit the website and familiarize yourself with the Broward County terms and conditions.
Great. Chris included a time frame. We just want to reinforce those were approximate time frames. So please ensure that you're checking BidSync, which is now known as Periscope 2G, for the final advertised solicitation. Again, we're shooting for mid-January. As part of the solicitation, we will have a pre-bid meeting and then a separate site visit. We will allow for written questions and answers and issue any addenda as applicable. After bid opening due date, county will review the bids and the low responsive and responsible bidder for award recommendation, contract execution, and the notice to proceed. This is just a reminder, this will be in effect once the final advertised bid is issued. A cone of silence will be in effect, and that prohibits any communications between the board, county administrator, her staff, and all affected persons as defined in the ordinance. That will be listed in the bid, but we wanted to remind vendors now. As we mentioned, please ensure you're registered for Periscope S2G, previously known as BidSync. For Broward County solicitations, there is not a fee, so that is not required. But please register. That will be what will be required to submit a future bid solicitation. Again, as Stacy requested, please email her with your information, name, email, contact information, company, and whether you're a prime or sub. She will propose a list of today's vendor attendance and send it out to all attendees today.